Who was Bryce Finnick? Well, I'm sure you've already heard about his collection of short stories, which he wrote throughout his life. They are mostly inspired by his childhood, which he had very eventful, so he had a lot to write about. He was born in Nashville, and he lived there with his parents, who unfortunately he didn't spend much time with because they were bootleggers, and they spent a lot of time out of town.
It is very interesting because during Bryce Finnick's life there happened two major crimes. The first one happened when he was just a child. His parents were bootleggers and there was huge money coming from their business. They were able to afford a mansion and a personal teacher for Bryce. However, this soon got the attention of the police. Police broke into their house in the middle of the night in attempts to arrest Bryce's parents. Bryce's father tried to escape and ran out of the house. He was shot in the head by one of the police officers and died in front of eyes of his wife and child. Bryce's mother was taken into the female prison near New York and committed suicide after 2 weeks. Bryce was taken into the orphanage.
At the age of 10, when his parents were arrested, Bryce was sent to an orphanage where he had to basically start a new life. Unfortunately, the kids there didn't really like him that much because they thought that he was different, and he really was. He had his own world, his big imagination, but he didn't really care that they didn't care. He was all right by himself. And at the age of 18, he had to leave the orphanage because he was an adult, and he went to work for this very rich family as a housekeeper, where he immediately fell in love with their beautiful daughter, Marie. And good for him, she fell in love with him as well, and eventually they got married.
Well, after Bryce's wedding, he started to write for a local newspaper called the New York Voice, and there he was publishing his short stories, since he always wanted to be a writer and he was interested in literature in his early childhood. And his stories were pretty good and popular among people, but they were unlike the other stories that you could read in those times, because they involved some kind of criticism of the society and people in those times. His stories were also inspired by his own life. For instance, the story The Adopted Child from the Next Village is a clear description of his traumatic years that he lived through in orphanage after his parents were arrested because of the bootlegging crime. And the problematics of bootlegging is also described in the story A Mysterious Man, where there is a character of innocent woman whose husband is a bootlegger. And we can clearly see that Bryce can find himself in the person of this woman, since he was also the victim of crimes like this in 1920s.
So we went to visit Bryce's great-granddaughter, who told us some stories from his personal life and what he was like personally and what a great father he was.
Well, my grandpa used to tell me a lot of stories about Bryce Finnick, my great-grandfather. And I heard many positive things, not just about him being an amazing writer, that's obvious, but about his personality. He was always kind, funny, up to play with his child. He was always present. Unfortunately, unlike his wife, who was, as we learned, a murderer. Yeah, well, that wasn't fun. But other than that, he was an amazing person, and I am very grateful for that, because my grandfather and then my father had an amazing role model for how to be a father, and I can't complain. I never met him, but based on how he raised his child. I think he must have been amazing.
And also when he was inspired by the later events in his life, his short stories were also getting more dramatic. For instance, his story Ain't Misbehaving has a character of a woman that is so possessed by herself that she eventually commits suicide. And it's something that he can relate to since his own wife was very possessed with wealth. So we can see that he was probably inspired by his wife in writing the characteristic for this person in the story. And his two last stories in this collection are allegory for the Civil War in 1920s, since they both involve African-American characters that are escaping from some xenophobia or just some anger and fear that was in those times towards anything different and non-American.
The second major crime involved Bryce and his wife directly. His wife was having an affair, but her lover betrayed her and took over her bank account. After losing their family fortune, she and Bryce was forced to move into cheaper neighborhoods with their son.
When Bryce and Mary lost a majority of their money, they had to move a lot, and eventually they came to Springfield, Illinois, and they lived in this small, poor village, which had a very bad impact on Bryce's wife because, well, she was used to, she grew up in a wealthy family and she never had money problems before, and now she was becoming very possessed by wealth and money.
Her mental state got worse and she developed almost psychotic tendencies. One evening she got angry at Bryce because of their financial situation and took a knife from the kitchen table. She stabbed Bryce, and after his death, she killed herself.
And it had a huge impact on their son, which we actually found a recording of him talking about how he was going through this experience this time of their life.
Well, I did notice some changes in my mother's behavior. I didn't know what was going on because I was too young. Later, I couldn't stand her behavior, so I went to the wall. When I was walking down the street, some woman came up to me and told me how my mother killed my father and that she killed me. I was terrified and I had a big trauma. I was sent to the orphanage also as my father. I was there until 18, and when they let me out from the orphanage, I stood up to my big trauma and fear and went back to my parents' house. I found there a lot of documents, material, and stories what my father was writing. There were a lot of information I was looking for. So I put these materials, stories, and documents together and made a book.
After Bryce's son published the collection of his short stories, it became very popular. And thanks to Bryce's life, we can see that he wasn't just an amazing writer, but also a great person.
I do actually have a funny story from my grandfather's childhood. Bryce and his wife were about to throw him a big birthday party for his, I think, eighth birthday or something like that. But he was a very curious child, so he decided he would take a look at the cake into the fridge, which of course ended terribly because he went there, took the cake, it fell on the ground, and yeah, he was very, very scared because he knew how angry his mother would be if she found out. But luckily for him, Bryce came in and he was very chill about it. So he promised him to buy a new cake until his mother finds out, and everything turned out very well. So yeah, I remember how thankful he was for this one time.